Okay, welcome everybody to this afternoon's session of Marxism. My name is Siobhan Hawthorne. I'm a member of the Socialist Workers' Party from London, Walthamstow, and I also work in the NHS. I'll be chairing this meeting, obviously. And the meeting, just to make sure you're all in the right room, is 50 years since the coup in Chile, 1973, with our speaker, Mario Nain. Mario was a refugee from Pinochet's Chile. He was an activist, a revolutionary under the dictatorship, and came over here in 1977. And has also been an activist ever since, and a socialist. You probably are, most have probably been in meetings before, but just to fill you in how the meeting will run, Mario will speak for about 30 minutes, after which we will break into small groups to talk to your neighbour, maybe think about questions you might want to ask or any queries, just to break the ice a little bit, after which we'll open it up for discussion. And we have about half an hour for discussion. There will be an announcement at the end, but I'll let you know about that when that's about to happen. So I will hand over to Mario. Thank you.
Thank you, comrades. It will be 15 years on the 11th of September of this year, where there was a fierce fighting between two powerful camps in Chile. One, the working class and its allies, and the second one, the Chilean ruling class, aided by US imperialism. But before I get into the details of the unfolding revolution in Chile from 1970 to 1973, allow me to place that particular event within a general context. The 1960s and the 1970s, it was a decade of resistance worldwide. The brutal war carried out by US imperialism against the Vietnam people arose the spirit of resistance around the world. In the center of the beast in Europe and America, students and workers rose up saying, end this brutality. In the periphery of the system, like in Chile, was exactly the same. Also, on those decades, there was the uprising of Black people in America in order to stop segregation and the ugly face of racism, plus the civil rights movement in Ireland. The peak of that struggle, of course, it was in 1968 in France, where 10 million workers, they were on a strike for 3 weeks. The ruling class in France and around the world, they were fearing revolution. Apparently, de Gaulle escaped somewhere because he thought that was the end. 2 years later, just 2 years later, an explosion of revolution happened in Chile from 1970 to 1972. Revolution, comrades, is like something really incredible, where the mass of people enter the stage of history. The 4th of September 1970, the Chilean people elected Salvador Allende, the president of Chile. He won power through a coalition of political parties. The most important political party within that coalition was the Communist Party and the Socialist Party. And the world watched attentively, because was it possible to change the capitalist society into a socialist society by peaceable means? Was it possible to use the organ of the capitalist state, the institution of the capitalist states, like the army, the police, the juridical system, the mass communication media, and so on. Was it really possible to transform those organs to a different society? That was precisely the strategy of the political leadership of the Chilean Revolution. They thought that because Chile had an unstable bourgeois democratic government, it was possible to transform this rotten society by non-means of violence, by peaceful means. That was really the political leadership of the revolution. The first year of the government, people had more confidence. There were hundreds of strikes in the first year of the government, hundreds of homeless people taking over empty lands to build a roof over their heads. Hundreds of landless peasants took over the land from the landowner. The counter-revolution, they went sort of sitting back. They didn't say, okay, we lost the election, and therefore we're not going to intervene. Completely the opposite, comrade. The counter-revolutionary forces began to organize themselves from day one of the government. US imperialism set up a committee of people monitoring the situation in Chile. The war criminal Henry Kissinger said that the Chilean economy should scream because they dare to elect a different government. 9 days after the election of Salvador Allende, the ruling class formed a fascist party, an openly fascist party, to intimidate workers, try to sort of, go and impose their violence. The workers replied in a very militant way. Not only there were strikes and factory occupation, but also committee of people to defend their neighborhoods, to defend the workplaces. What was the program of the Popular Unity Government? The program similar to Jeremy Colvin proposed when he was running for election in this country. He was talking about nationalization, the strategic industry of Chile, primarily the copper mine and the ITT, telephone company belong to US corporations, and plus 90 factories to come into the state control. In fact, it's 91, but it wasn't even 91. It was only 30. The first year of the government was lucky because the price of copper, the main export of Chile for its revenue, rose up. And therefore, the Popular Unity afford to give a little bit comfort, the population. For example, a liter of milk for every single children in schools. You could think that's a very minor sort of, gift from the state, but in a poor country, in Chile, it is an extremely important, because under the system, there is malnutrition, not just in children, but also in the whole population. That was the first sort of act. Then there was an election. The ruling class thought this was only a municipal election the first year. They thought, here, the opportunity, to get rid of this government by electoral means. Sorry, it's so hot that I'm drying. In fact, what happened? That the Popular Unity government increased the percentage of the vote. In other words, the whole population of Chile was behind this government. In political terms, in reality, not my telephone, is it? In reality, the class struggle was beginning to polarize to such an extent that there was almost daily confrontation in the street between the reactionary forces and the workers and its allies. Pitched battles in the center of Chile and in all the important cities. The ruling class played a parliamentary game and also an extra parliamentary game. The extra parliamentary game, they mobilized the middle class with the fascists at the front in the street. They wanted to control the street. The reactionary workers say, no, you're not going to control the street. The street is belong to us. Almost daily, there was battles, and the police always repressed the workers, not the fascists, not the reactionaries. And people that were saying, we do have a government belong to us, but the repressive apparatus like the police are still repressing us. What's going on in this situation? And the highest level of combativity came in August 29th. The ruling class tried to paralyze the country. The lorry owners blocked every single highway up and down the country, paralyzed transport, commerce. The bosses organization ordered them to shut down every single industry, every single supermarket. The popular unity was completely paralyzed. What they did was to call the army for order in the situation. But here is the remarkable militancy of the Chilean working class. They began to take over factories that they were closed, and it wasn't nationalization. It was the expropriation of the factories belonged to the ruling class. There was an amazing amount of militancy up and down the country. There are testimony of workers where they say that with one arm, a pistol, I think, and homemade weapons, they went to the supermarket and they opened up. They went to the highways and requisitioned the lorries. Neighborhood committees, primarily women, played an important role, to keep a food on the table. In fact, there is an estimation that, by the way, they taking over the factory, which it wasn't nationalization, it was expropriation of the private property. They called this movement industrial belt. Industrial belt because it can group 30, 40, 50, 60 factories. And they elect a committee to coordinate with other factories. So it was an incredible militancy from below. There is an estimation, and there is an argument about it, that in the whole of the industrial belt, 100,000 of workers participated in production and distribution in those crucial moments when the ruling class and the US imperialism tried to strangle the economy and therefore demanded the resignation of Salvador Allende. Without those militancy from below, I think the ruling class could have won, but it was completely the opposite. The industrial belt, the working class, the peasantry in the countryside, the shantytown dweller formed this monumental movement and defeated the insurrection of the bourgeoisie, completely defeated the insurrection of the bourgeoisie. What was the response of the Popular Unity government? In order to please US imperialism, please the ruling class, they put 3 generals in the government. 3 generals in the government. That caused confusion. People were asking, how on earth our president are putting those people who repressed us? What is going on? What is going on? And then the Popular Unity government was forced to pass a law, and the law gave a green card for the armed forces to go to every single factories, every single working class community, every single peasantry that they had taken over the land, with the excuse of finding arms. Of course, there was no arms. If there was only one machine gun in the whole thing. And people could not understand. And then, worse of that, the Popular Unity told the workers, give back those factories that you have taken over. It isn't in the program. Give it back. There was anger, fury, frustration, and disorientation in the movement. We couldn't understand. We couldn't understand. I'm talking about as a young man. I was telling my comrade here that I didn't have exactly the same politics that I do have now in Chile. I think revolution happens, it's imposed on us. So even in my naivety, and the whole population, I could say, they were absolutely confused. We had a government, and the government was repressing us. An incredible situation. After the Lorry honor, without any exaggeration, the Chilean revolution was balancing between life and death. And this is not an emotive word. That was precisely the situation. Then, a bit later, one regiment in Santiago rose up to overthrow the Popular Unity government. They went to the city center with tanks and infantry, and there was a fierce battle, those people who were defending the Moneda Palace. Eventually, those people who kicked out the conspirators came back from the battle. Ordinary soldiers, there was a fraternization between workers and soldiers. I saw with my own eyes, soldiers with a rifle to say, we are with you. That was a very dangerous situation for the ruling class. There was this kind of encounter between working class soldiers and workers. An amazing spectacle. Then in the evening, there was a massive demonstration outside the Moneda Palace. And President Allende came to the balcony, and there was a unison saying, shut down the parliament. It's a nest of conspirators and rats. Persecutes, those officers who tried to mount a military coup d'etat. Persecute the Nazis that they're putting explosions, in power, electric powers. Sometimes half of the city was completely in darkness. So, and they said, we're not going to return any factory taken over during the insurrection of the bourgeoisie. We're going to keep it ourselves. And Allende, I can see it very clearly, came into the balcony and he said, we are not going to do more factory takeover. because our revolution has a limited amount of factory that we can take, and it has to be peaceful. I'm not going to shut down the parliament. There was outrage, there was frustration, and the anger about what was going on. By the way, let me say one word about Salvador Allende. Salvador Allende was a principled man. He died in the Moneda Palace with the rifle in his hand, defending the Chilean revolution. He was a Jeremy Colvin of his time, honest politician, incredible, courageous. Minutes before he died, in the only radio station available during the military coup d'etat, he gave one of the most powerful speeches that I could ever hear. And the guy, he knew that his life was minutes away to be over. And it did happen. It was an incredible, emotive speech, believing that we can reform this society, that the ruling class and the forces of reaction outside the country, like imperialism, could respect the democratic will and decision of a nation. It was an incredible, incredible situation. And then 5 days before the military coup d'etat, the industrial belt, the most powerful organization that the Chilean working class have created from below, wrote an open letters to Salvador Allende as a desperate situation. It's a long letter, but it says, Compañero Allende, what are we doing to defend the Chilean revolution? What is the plan to defend the Chilean revolution? You told us to organize. We took over the factory. We're not going to give it back. We're going to stay in our workplaces to defend the revolution. This is 5 days before. And there was a phrase that always stuck in my head. It says that a terrible midnight is approaching. And that terrifying thing will be that the Chilean revolution will be drawn in blood, the warm blood of poor people. Of course, there was no plan. Of course, they were absolutely correct. 5 days later, the clock struck at midnight, and the ruling class, comrades, unleashed one of the most violent aggression against a civilian population. The whole armed forces was mobilized. Tanks, infantry, helicopter gun, whatever. And the whole repression, up and down the country, it was literally speaking a slaughter, a completely disarmed people defending ourselves with very rudimentary weapons. Testimony of people who were in the industrial belts always heard a rumor that eventually weapons will arrive to the factories, and working class military will train us in the art of a warfare against the ruling class. But there were only rumors. There was only rumors. The massacre was absolutely complete. They used fighter jets to bombard the Moneda Palace, which was in the center of the city. we could see, plume of a smoke and sounds. A total war against the population. A total savage war against the population. And they used tanks, infantry, to neighborhood communities. The industrial belt suffered enormously. Those who survived, they do have this testimony that in one factory, there were about 100 workers defending the workplace. There was only one pistol. And then they began to fabricate in a very quick time, homemade sort of, weapons, completely useless. The battle was completely unequal. The battle was a slaughter from our side. I will never ever forget, even as a young man, during 3 years, we had this hope for a better society. That, happiness to be better than our parents. And there was that confidence. We look, to the front, not on the floor. But after the military coup d'etat, there was a terror, fear. That fear that is impossible to describe. We were all hiding because the repression was a collective repression. It didn't matter whether you were a member of the Popular Unity, a trade unionist, women's organization, shantytown dweller, it didn't matter. The repression was to castigate an entire population because they dare to take over the wealth that workers, they produce daily, year after year. They touch, the sacred property of the ruling class. And the US imperialism was heavily involved in that slaughter. The CIA channeled money. The CIA gave weapons to the fascists. The army gave weapons to the fascists. So that was really the unfolding of a living revolution. It took less than 3 years for the Chilean society to become an extremely polarized situation. As I said, 2 camps, they were fighting daily who control the power of the state. Now, what would a revolutionary party like the SWP, which I belong to, would have done on those extremely volatile years where the day after day the situation changed? What a genuine revolutionary party would have done? That is a question that I'm going to put to you, comrades, in order to sort of, analyze it. I always remember a quotation from a leader of the French Revolution. I think his name was Saint Just. And it always stuck in my mind when I read it, where it says, those who made a half of a revolution, they dig their own grave. That was precisely what happened in Chile. That was precisely what happened in Chile. Half of a revolution is a death sentence. And counter-revolution is savage. I was talking with a young comrade. I said to him that in a genuine socialist revolution, not many people died because the army comes to the side of the workers and the workers enter in the stage of history. So the ruling class, they don't have the weapons to kill. But in a counter-revolution, it's an absolutely a bluff letting. That was the situation of Chile. Thank you very much, comrade.
Hi, Mario. Thank you for the talk. So I believe after 73, when Pinochet came in, he had a lot of support from the US and from global finance institutions. And I believe Chile was one of the first real experiments outside of the West where they experimented with neoliberalism. And it was especially good for them because it was a dictatorship which broke up unions and took away social security. So in light of that, and because politics globally is polarizing yet again, do you think there's hope for Chile and South America to create multiple socialist states, or do you think they're still hard pressed under the foot of imperialism and global finance?
Yeah, I think that it's such an important meeting, and I think we see from 1973 the reverberations again and again and again, almost like not the same situation, but the same kind of forces repeating themselves, especially across Latin America. And maybe it would be good to talk a little bit about the Chile of today. The president is Gabriel Boric, and he is, he came in off the back of the 2019 massive revolt in Chile, promising environmental protections, rights for women, all of these quite progressive things. But now we stand, I'll just get the figures up because I think it's important. We stand in a moment where his new constitution has been voted down. The old constitution was Pinochet era, like it was absolutely hated. And now people are not voting for his constitution. I think it was 61.9% of people did vote for this new constitution, and then now there is a very right-wing, the Republican Party now, who will actually have more of a control over what goes in this new constitution. I think that is a massive step, and that is because of capitulation, not because, again, I'll say this, people have said it, not because Boric is a terrible, terrible man or terrible leader, but because the forces of the bosses are way too strong when you try and have a left-wing leader in parliament. And also, there's terrible inflation in Chile at the moment, yet he has done nothing about it. And we see this time in the current day, we see this again and again. Look what happened in Peru with Pedro Castillo, and you look at how now he has been ejected from Peru by a right-wing government. And I think we need to keep on looking at that and seeing the limitations whenever a left-wing leader, and often they come from a mass movement, they come from people wanting better, come into power. They are absolutely limited by their own position. They're absolutely limited by needing to capitulate to the bosses. So I think maybe talking a bit about the Chile of today would be important as well.
Yeah, great talk, Mario. Obviously, what happened in Chile 50 years ago was one of the stark examples of the dilemma that socialism faced between reform and revolution. Mario has described the process in which the election of Allende sets in motion this process that culminates in massive workers on the strikes, asking the Allende government to give us weapons because we're going to get overthrown and we want to define the government we have elected and the gain we have achieved. And Allende, instead of conceding to those demands, what he does is he brings into his own government, into his own cabinet, the people who eventually overthrow him. So it's a very stark example of this dilemma. It doesn't mean, because of that it's not contested and that everybody has learned the right lessons from that experience. The Russian Revolution, Leon Trotsky said that the Revolutionary Party, one of its roles is to be the memory of the working class. Some parties don't try to articulate the memory of the working class. Instead, they try to articulate the forgiveness of the working class. And the whole myth has been built around what happened in Chile 50 years ago that tries to conceal and hide the real lessons from that experience. Because it's true, Allende was a committed socialist. He gave his life to the idea of socialism. Now, we should also be clear that the shortcomings and the weaknesses of the political ideology based upon the idea of achieving change within the system led not only to him giving his own life, but also to thousands of working class militants, a whole generation being imprisoned, murdered, and tortured. And the whole tragedy, the most tragic example of this forgiveness 50 years on is precisely what the last speaker talked about. That 5 decades later, you have finally the possibility of left-wing change in Chile, a huge insurrection on the streets in 2019, The energies of that movement are channeled into parliamentary change, and they end once again with the Pinochet constitution in place and those holds being defeated. Just to finish, as other speakers have said, outside we've got a socialist from Islington who once said on television that Allende was his favorite historic figure. Here in the room, we've got another socialist from Islington who argued to us here today that if we want to achieve change, we have to look not to the power of Allende, but to the power of the working class masses that we saw in Chile. So pick a side, join the revolutionaries, become the memory of the working class, and let's make sure that we honor the deaths of our communists in Chile and many other countries by not making the same mistakes that were made in that experience.
In Chile.
I'm from Chile, Chile.
Ah, qué bien.
So my Spanish is so my apologies. I just wanted to share with you, with people here, is that this analysis that the cooperative shared is absolutely marginal within Chile. That's why it's so valuable. You know, the importance of the industrial belt is just a marginal tradition that just few people admit that I never experienced torture. I have been, well, Chile will experience repression until nowadays. We still have feeding, we still tear gases a lot. But yes, these lessons are very relevant. So feel happy that you have the chance. You know, this lesson, even with all the murders, even with all the torture, this is very marginal in the Chile and the Chilean left. So thank you so much for sharing. And yes, I was about to say exactly what he said, you know, that it's talking about revolution, republicanism, and everything. So thank you so much. And you are one of the few proper revolutionaries that somebody can make. Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, that's it. Just thank you.
We're now going to have an announcement. The comrade's going to come down and make an announcement. Yeah, go through the announcement, and then I will have another announcement, and then I will call the speaker back to sum up.
Me first?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be very quick because I've spoken already, and I'm sure that people are very keen to hear what Mario has to say. I'm here to make an appeal. Yeah, we in the SWP organize this Marxism festival every year. Not as an echo chamber for us, you know, for our own members to talk to one another, but to provide a much necessary space within the left, within the movements, to talk about developments in British politics and world politics and discuss the way forward for our movements. So I'm here to ask you, before you leave this room, please do consider making a donation towards the Marxism Festival. Buckets are going to be going around the room. So empty your pockets and please donate what you can. Every little helps. Big donations, small donations, everything will help us fund this Marxism Festival. People who were at the opening rally will know that Marxism Festival doesn't make any profits and is entirely funded by working class, socialists, and activists from across the movement, such as the people in this room who support this festival, and they value the space that it provides. People will know as well that this has been the biggest Marxism festival that has taken place for over a decade. That's fantastic, but that means more rooms, it means bigger venues, it means accommodating for more people running the creche, so that people with caring responsibilities can enjoy the politics and take part in discussions. It means a bigger team of comrades helping out run the event smoothly, as well as many other things. Also, next year, we want to organize an even bigger Marxism festival. I think the fact that this event is much bigger than it's been recently reflects that our class is on the rise, and that this kind of space is becoming more and more necessary to discuss the way forward. I'm sure that everybody here will agree with me that next year we don't want to be sweating in an overcrowded room. We want to think about bigger venues, about bigger possibilities. So please donate generously. The buckets will be going around. If you don't have any cash, don't worry. When you leave the venue, outside you will see a poster with a QR code that you can scan. You can donate online, and if not, you can visit any of the SWP stalls on campus, and there will be people there with card machines where you can make a cashless donation. All right.
Thank you very much, comrade, for the great contribution that you have made in this meeting. I will try to answer certain question. I think the question that somebody asked that after the military coup d'etat, few months later, they imposed this doctrine of neoliberalism. And they did it on the back of tanks rolling over the skull of workers. There was no resistance whatsoever about the new economical model imposed by the international ruling class. And then, as you know, in the 70s, Margaret Thatcher came to this country and imposed exactly the same model, and also in America. Now, it's a worldwide phenomenon where the ruling class try to extract as much as surplus value, you know, in order to generate more profit. And that is the situation. And the second situation about neoliberalism, it was how to curtail the organization of the working class. You could see in this country, the miners' strike were defeated. Not because the miners, they didn't have the courage of 1 year strike. It was the betrayal of the Labour Party and the betrayal of the TUC in this country. So neoliberalism is a worldwide phenomenon, but they are hypocritical because neoliberalism means that the state doesn't intervene in the economy. The state, it doesn't put their hands, you know, in the whole sort of, you know, invisible market. But the reality is not true, because during the financial crisis, who gave money to the bankers? The state gave money to the bankers. And where does the money come to the state? The ordinary workers paying taxes. So there is neoliberalism and harsh doctrine of liberalism for working class, and for them, we have to bail out, you know, the crazy system. That is the neoliberalism. The second thing I would like to sort of say, somebody said that, you know, Chile is enjoying one of the most successful economy in Latin America. I don't know whether you heard that, my friend or comrade, Christian. If the Chilean people were so happy under the state that they're living, why there was an enormous uprising that Sophie was talking about, where millions of people came to the street, and they came to the street because they are suffering hunger, poverty, and humiliation, really. For example, just to give an example, if you retired in Chile, you do have a minimum amount of money to survive. In other words, you retire and you have to keep working because the private pension is not enough. So I don't know where people they got this idea that Chile is a Switzerland. I don't know. I don't know where did you get that. Now, what is the political situation in Chile? I think Sophie summarized precisely what's going on. There was an uprising in 2019. At the forefront of that uprising were the students, and we're talking about here, not a university student. We're talking about ordinary secondary school kids that they refuse to accept, you know, 30 years of neoliberalism, 30 years of oppression, 30 years of, you know, unequal society, and then was extended like a wildfire in the entire country. As a result of that, this Boric, a man who was a student leader and played the revolutionary when he was a student leader, he was at the forefront fighting with the police, talking about socialism, talking about revolution. But when he was elected, the president, the youngest president, apparently in Chile, 26, it doesn't impress me because I think Trotsky was 26 when he was, you know, the chairman of the Soviet in 1905. So I don't go alone, that young, you know, and therefore is the future. So what happened to him? Where are his revolutionary rhetorics? Now in government, he's trapped within the capitalist machinery. His program is on the floor. The far right is on the rise. They feel more confident, the far right, now than when there was an uprising. So it's exactly the same what's going on in Latin America. Lula was elected in Brazil, and all the left winners in Brazil, are they challenging the ruling class state? Are they saying that workers who produce the wealth of the society should belong to them? Are they saying the ownership of the tool of the society, whatever it is, from computer to factory and technology, should belong to them? No, no. They are following exactly the same recipe of neoliberalism. They don't really want to touch the powerful and the billionaires. They want to put a little reform program. And therefore, it is a very volatile situation in Latin America. It isn't only in Latin America, this volatility. How I would like to finish, comrade, here is one of our comrades called Alex Kalinikos wrote a book. I think you can see it, around here. The title is The Age of Catastrophe. I haven't read the book. People have recommended me, and I think it's a brilliant book. If I do have the money, I will buy it. Unfortunately, I'm a poor man. I'm a poor revolutionary. Well, all revolutionaries are poor anyway. I think that is the nature. Now, I do agree with the title, because capitalism is driving the whole of humanity into an unpredictable situation. If you think about climate change, which is already happening, and those people who are paying, for climate change is in the global south. The rich country suffer less. Even in rich countries, climate change is reality. Australia was underwater not long ago. Wildfire. There will be a point where the food production will be limited because of climate change. There will be competition of water because of climate change. It will create millions and millions of people on the move. We could face more war. At the present, we're facing an inter-imperialist war. When a nurse in this country go on the television studio and the presenter, they say, but you're asking too much money. And the nurse doesn't make the connection, unfortunately, or some of them they do. And I said, but what about this government is sending billions and billions and billions of pounds, in the slaughterhouse of the Ukraine. And there is immediately money for destruction and death. Why not? For the nurses, for the teachers, for the railway, for the post office. This is the situation that we are living now. It is a real catastrophe going on. I think my young comrade called the word of Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa Luxemburg died as a principal revolutionary. She was killed, by the way, but she didn't see the horror of the Second World War. She didn't see the Holocaust. She didn't see the Vietnam War. She didn't see climate change. She didn't see hunger to such an extent, and put the slogan, humanity is facing two choices. It's a complete barbarism where a civilization regress to such an extent that we're going to become, less than a human. Think about the possibility of a nuclear war. And this is not a theoretical thing. In the conflict of the imperialist conflict in the Ukraine, easily there could be, a nuclear confrontation. That is our midnight. That is that civilization disappeared. So I could urge every single comrade here that we have to fight the system. And the only way to fight the system, it has to be the organized working class and its all allies. The ruling class, they do have powerful machinery of control, parties, mass communication media, the army, the spies, the police. They do have a very, very powerful forces. But we are powerful as well. Because think about this. If there is a general strike in this country, nothing moves. Nothing moves. The bosses, they're not going to the factory. Who run this society is really every single woman and man around the world, the working class. But the working class has to organize in a genuine revolutionary party, belong to them. That is really the task in front of us, comrades. I'm an old man, but I would still have the fire to fight this system. So I could urge you seriously to join the SWP. Marxism is a focus of resistance. It isn't an academic exercise. It is to arm ourselves with idea to fight this rotten system. Thank you very much, comrades.